Good evening and good afternoon. I hope you guys been having a wonderful week. I know I have. And my God, I can't believe we're already done with June, or at least more than halfway there. It's like I blinked and the month was already gone. And in a couple of weeks, we will be celebrating the 4th of July. And I don't know about you, but I cannot wait for those fantastic food deals. Oh my God, those food deals are going to be delicious. But anyway, do I have a special episode for you guys since we're about mainly a month, more than a month away from the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, a movie that is officially bringing the Fox characters over to the MCU, and I am super excited. I already bought my tickets for Deadpool and Wolverine. IMAX seats. I'm going to buy myself some popcorn, a drink. Ooh, it's going to be perfection. You know what? I may treat myself to dinner. I'll probably do that. But with that being said, since Deadpool and Wolverine are about a month out, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about the time when Marvel/Disney tried to kill off the X-Men and have them replaced. Yes, you heard me right. They actually tried to do this. They really did. And honestly, it was insane. Now, of course, Disney will never officially state that they tried to kill off the X-Men, but many comic book fans know that they tried to do so and failed miserably. So let's go ahead and talk about this interesting time in comics and turn back the clock to about 10 plus years ago, to the early days of the MCU, when we still had hope and everything was on the horizon. And of course, everything was going pretty good. Iron Man was a hit, even teased the formation of the Avengers, and its sequel brought in some good money, and the inklings of a cinematic universe were on hand. Everything was leading to the Avengers movie. But there was a slight problem. Many of Marvel's properties were still under other companies' control. Well, at least their movie rights. You had Ghost Rider, Daredevil, Blade, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and most importantly, the X-Men. And this was not good because while they did still have a lot of characters under the banner of the House of Mouse, many of them were not well known. And you really can't have a cinematic universe without multiple characters to make the world feel alive. Not to mention, a lot of big comic book events usually had the participation of these characters. And you gotta remember, Marvel 10 years prior to that, or maybe 15 prior, was broke. Almost went bankrupt in the 90s. So they ended up selling their properties to other studios. We all know, of course, Sony picked up Spider-Man. They did pick up, I want to say, a few other characters. At the top of my head, I don't remember. Fox had the Fantastic Four, and more importantly, the X-Men. Universal got their hands on Hulk, and I honestly forgot who got their hands on Blade and Ghost Rider. But still, a lot of the popular characters during those comic book times were already taken. And the Avengers, while well known, its individual characters were not. I mean, Doctor Strange, before his movie, was not like a household name. He was a C-level hero. And of course, we cannot forget about a team that was more of the D-level, not really well known until James Gunn got his hands on them. And that is, of course, the Guardians of the Galaxy. They were such an obscure team that I didn't even know about them until the movie came out. And of course, that's what Disney had to do. They had to take all these characters that were not as well known and make them popular because, of course, everybody else had the popular characters. So again, in 2011, to attempt to alleviate this hole, they decided to, besides of course making movies from their lesser known characters, they would also use their other property about a team of heroes whose powers were not given to them by some accident, but unlocked from within. A group that has battled discrimination, been around since the 60s, has its own base of operation, and whose leader was in love with a redhead. And no, I am not talking about the X-Men. I am talking about the Inhumans. Now you're probably asking yourself, who the heck are the Inhumans? The Inhumans was an old Marvel property that first appeared in December of 1965, about 2 years after the premiere or debut of the X-Men. And the Inhumans didn't even appear in their own comic. They actually appeared in a Fantastic Four comic, and later in Thor issue 146 to 152 in 1968, where their origins would be revealed. And since I'm usually in the habit of explaining who people are, let's go ahead and get started. The Inhumans are an offshoot of humans who were genetically engineered by the Kree after the Kree had discovered humanity's latent potential thanks to Celestials. Ironically enough, the Inhumans were one of the many races that the Kree engineered. The goal was to use them as soldiers against the Skrulls, but the Supreme Intelligence abandoned the project as he saw this would lead to his own destruction. The Inhumans were based in, I am probably going to butcher this name, Atlan, a city that was technologically advanced and was capable of flight. And not to mention, because they were advanced, they had invisibility that basically let them cloak themselves, so nobody looked up and of course freaked out because there was a floating city. The Inhumans lived there and were ruled by the royal family. The head of that family was a hero named Black Bolt, and boy was he powerful. He also ruled with his wife, Medusa. So Black Bolt's power was basically he could unleash destructive shockwaves capable of destroying planets, and has done so in the comics. Like, let me tell you, his power is connected to his speech. So this man will not talk at all unless, of course, his powers are dampened. Even a whisper can be devastating. That's how powerful this man is. Now, his wife could control her hair, and her hair was strong enough to lift about a ton, maybe a ton and a half with ease. But here's the other thing. Inhumans basically had a base set of powers, of course, other than their regular ones. They had super strength, stamina, all the others, agility, just like a repertoire of standard stuff. Nothing like above and beyond, but they can easily beat up a human. Now, going back to 2011, Marvel needed to grow their universe further, especially since Fox was still making X-Men movies with no plans to stop or to sell them back to Disney. And you gotta remember, 2011 is when X-Men First Class was released, and that was a huge hit. So Fox still had their X-Men property on the horizon. They were still planning on making more movies with them, especially since they got a lot more money with X-Men First Class. So with that happening, Disney decided that it needed to make a push to have the Inhumans take over for the X-Men in both comics and in their cinematic universe. They did this by pushing more comic runs of the Inhumans and debuting more Inhumans and an ultimate plan to kill the X-Men. In 2013, a comic run called Infinity series was released, where Black Bolt and basically was trying to stop Thanos from attacking his city. It's a huge comic book line and multiple stories kind of tied into this. So I'm not going to go over the entire thing, but I'm just going to tell you the tidbit from Infinity issue number 3, where Black Bolt used his power to destroy the city to prevent Thanos from using it. This released the Terrigen Mist, and this was a special mist that altered Inhuman biology, basically giving them their powers by unlocking the alterations that the Kree did. This allowed the mist to spread across the world slowly and usually in pockets. And because of this, many Inhumans started to merge across the Earth that were not originally planets of the island. One popular hero, who ironically enough was going to be a mutant before Disney started to make some changes, was Miss Marvel's Kamala Khan. Now, you're probably wondering how this ties in with Marvel trying to kill the X-Men. Well, that special mist that was unlocking many people's powers or latent abilities who were descendants of those modified by the Kree, which, if you haven't noticed, was just an excuse to copy the whole mutants unlocking their powers bid from the X-Men. And it was kind of a lazy thing to do, but again, they were trying to replace the X-Men. But anyway, this mist had also the unfortunate effect of killing any mutant who got caught within the mist. Yep, This mist was released to the world and was killing mutants, many of them, supposedly thousands at a time, through a disease called Mpox, which ironically enough first appeared in Avengers Volume 6, 2015, so about a year or two after the debut of Ms. Marvel. Now, depending on the mutant, it didn't really kill them outright, but it did end up killing them eventually. Sometimes it would be a slow burn, and those who had Mpox were very contagious and could spread the disease to other mutants. And here's the kicker, there was no cure. Also, it's worth noting that a year before this, they killed off Wolverine. So slowly, many of the famous X-Men were getting killed off. And after the Secret Wars event, it got even more interesting. So during this time, there was not really a lot of comics surrounding the X-Men. None like it was before. You of course had Old Man Logan running around with a couple of issues, especially since after Secret Wars, he ended up going to the main universe of 616 with a couple of other X-Men titles. But that was it. For the Inhumans, from 2012 to 18, you had multiple different Inhuman comics running with multiple crossovers as well, something that they really never did before. As I said, Disney was pushing hard for the Inhumans to become a household name. They wanted to add that special magic that they did for Guardians of the Galaxy. They even had the Inhumans play a huge part of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., if you guys remember that show. Remember, Daisy was an Inhuman. They had multiple seasons with the Inhumans being a big part of the story. But their attempts to make Inhumans popular with comic book fans was failing. Many still bought the X-Men comics over the Inhumans ones, which is why they still had to produce these comics, because they were still selling a lot more than the Inhumans, as I stated before. And the movie that they had stated to release in 2019 faded away. By 2016, it was taken off the MCU schedule. It also didn't help that with the Deadpool movie being released in 2016, so much hype went into the X-Men again, and a lot of people wanted more Deadpool comics. Which is why after 2016, after Secret Wars, and after the release of the Deadpool movie, Deadpool consistently got even more comic book runs, crossovers, and even joined the Avengers. So after all this, Disney decided to stop pulling its punches and release X-Men vs. Inhumans, which was an absolute mess. I'm not going to get into it because, again, multiple issues went into this event, tying this event. If I had to do this event, this would take probably an hour, over an hour, and sadly I don't have the time to go over this since it's already become a moot point. But I'll give you guys a brief synopsis. Basically, with many mutants dying and getting sick because of the Terrigen Mist, and the Inhumans' refusal to destroy the mist because it holds value to them. Can you imagine that? Refusing to destroy a mist that's killing people. The X-Men decided to go to war with the Inhumans and find a way to destroy the mist once and for all. Cyclops was supposedly leading the charge of this war, and the mutants went further, hitting harder against the Inhumans after Black Bolt killed Cyclops. But here's the thing. It was revealed that Cyclops actually died before the war even started, after getting exposed to the mist. Emma Frost, who was his second in command, had been projecting him to everyone, making it seem like he was killed by Black Bolt to boost everyone's blood level and have all the mutants want to kill the Inhumans. In the end of this whole comic book run, Moon Girl and Forge convinced Medusa, who was ruling over the Inhumans at this time, to destroy the mist. And Emma Frost was revealed to be a liar when it came to the whole Cyclops situation. And I will say this because it's going to get confusing. The person who revealed the lie to everybody was the younger version of Cyclops. And if you want to know about that, basically what happened, and this was before, the younger versions of the X-Men from the past was actually brought to the future. It was an entire thing, but again, that's just semantics. Just remember that this is comics and just crazy stuff happens all the time. So with young Cyclops revealing that old Cyclops was dead before the war even started, everybody stopped fighting in the war, and both Inhumans and mutants started going after or trying to hunt down Emma Frost, who basically started this war in the first place. Now, after this, after Emma Frost was exposed, she actually reprogrammed Sentinels to kill Inhumans. So the X-Men in the end teamed up with the Inhumans to stop all this from happening. The aftermath of this fight just frustrated the heck out of me because it led the mutants to be even more feared than before for fighting against the Inhumans. Again, crazy that people wouldn't be siding with them, especially since their people were dying. And I honestly don't see what the comic book version of the society was looking at when they were looking at the difference between the Inhumans and the mutants. The Inhumans have their own powers. Why was Disney trying to make them more likable than the mutants? Again, it just made no sense. Also, it's worth noting that barely anyone who wasn't a mutant or Inhuman got involved in this fighting. That's right, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Spider-Man, and a whole lot of heroes who had the X-Men's back in the past, who the X-Men had fought alongside with in multiple events, and even some of them who considered them as family did not show up. And you have to remember, Disney was trying their best to get rid of the X-Men and replace them with the Inhumans, and this event did not do it justice and just showed how desperate Disney was getting. Heck, they even released a TV show for the Inhumans and it bombed. The pilot of this thing went to the movie theater because they shot the pilot, the first 2 episodes, with IMAX cameras, and it bombed badly. Oh my god, the critics hated it, I hated it, it was just bad. So, for the life of them, they could not get them popular at all, and all their plans were going up in smoke. But those plans changed because in 2017, in November, they entered into negotiations to buy 21st Century Fox. And in December of that very year, it was announced that they would be purchasing Fox, allowing for them to get the movie rights of the X-Men under the umbrella of the House of Mouse, and more importantly, within the MCU's clutches. Now, with the X-Men back under Marvel's full control, Marvel had no more need for the Inhumans anymore and released Death of the Inhumans in 2018. Like, as soon as it happened, remember, December of 2017 is when everything was basically finalized. And in 2018, let's kill off the Inhumans. And you know what happened? Again, brief synopsis because multiple events, multiple tie-ins. But basically what happened is the Kree attacked and killed a majority of the Inhumans. Now, they did this because they were trying to recruit the Inhumans to their war and all that stuff. And because the Inhumans refused, the Kree decided, you know what? We're going to kill all the Inhumans. Now, of course, that didn't mean that they killed all the Inhumans. Medusa, Black Bolt, Lockjaw, and others did survive, but thousands upon thousands of Inhumans had been killed. And you know what Disney did to kind of show us what the future held for the Inhumans, especially after the Kree killed a bunch of them and left Black Bolt, Lockjaw, Medusa, and others hurting? Absolutely nothing. That's right. After the Death of the Inhumans comic book run, they didn't have another one. After years of trying to get them popular, they just stopped. I mean, I think, Black Bolt was the only person to have a crossover, and in that very crossover where he teamed up with Stephen Strange, Black Bolt died. Yep. Of course, he was later resurrected, but it's just funny. There was no sequel. There was no nothing, only a brief crossover where he got his butt whooped. They basically disappeared. And the only Inhuman to keep making appearances was Miss Marvel, because she was the only new character, the only Inhuman, who was extremely popular. And you know what happened? In 2023, Marvel decided to make Miss Marvel what she was originally intended to be, and that was a mutant. Yes, they changed her from an Inhuman to a mutant. And what makes it even funnier is that in the TV show, there's no mention of her being an Inhuman. They say there's a mutation. So they're just trying to erase the whole Inhuman part from history. I guarantee you, if you read a future synopsis of Miss Marvel for her comic book counterpart, it's going to say mutant. You may catch that she was an Inhuman, but it's probably going to just be something brief and just looked over. And in 2019 to even now, the X-Men entered into the, I'm probably going to butcher the name, the Croca era, where they basically made a nation of mutants and ended up having multiple upon multiple different comic book runs, focusing on different X-Men teams at the same time, which was something that was not going on for the past few years. So basically, with the X-Men in the Mouse of House, or my apologies, under the House of Mouse, there was no need to push the Inhumans anymore. So there you have it. Now you know about the time Disney tried to kill off the X-Men and have them replaced just a month shy of the greatest crossover movie since Spider-Man No Way Home. So with that being said, I really hope you enjoyed this fantastic, wild ride, learning a little more about the X-Men history from the past 10 years. Because again, nobody outside of comic book fans knew about this. Those of us who are comic book fans, you know about this history, and I'm glad I was able to share it with those who aren't comic book fans or are just trying to get into comics in general, because this is the type of history that needs to be remembered. Because I wouldn't be surprised if Disney was trying to pull this, not the same type of stunt, but some sort of stunt with the Spider-Man comics. Because Sony is never going to give up Spider-Man at all. Well, I should never say never, but they're not going to sell them anytime soon. I mean, they will milk Spider-Man until their dying days, probably. If they sell Spider-Man, it's going to be for billions of dollars. I mean, billions. Because Sony knows Marvel's going to want him. And they will make sure that they are paid through the wazoo just to sell him and for Disney to get him. So we'll see, and hopefully Disney and Marvel will not try to pull some stunt. Oh, actually, no, they're already pulling this stunt. If you read any of the Amazing Spider-Man by Zeb Wells, you know that they are trying to destroy Spider-Man because it absolutely sucks. Ultimate Spider-Man, on the other hand, is fantastic. They are actually giving us Spider-Man fans what we wanted from Peter. A family, a good life. I mean, Peter being miserable is just getting old at this point. I don't know who the editor is, but he must hate Spider-Man. Zeb Wells definitely does because his comic book run ideas are just terrible. But anyway, that's another episode for another day, and that's it for this week's episode. I can't wait for next week because next week we have a very special episode where I will be interviewing a man who not only owns his own production company, but also plays a big part in helping others in the audio drama world. So with that being said, I'll see you guys next week for this very special episode, especially since it's the episode before my 4th of July break. So I'll see you guys next week. Sayonara, see you later, and have a good one. Goodbye.